Hello everyone, Michael here, thank you for joining me. So today we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is fall prevention. Falls are the second leading cause of accidental death secondary to car accidents, accounting for 684,000 deaths annually worldwide, with the over 60s being in the highest risk category. In addition to deaths, 95% of all hip fractures are due to accidental falls. It's the leading cause of serious head trauma, and this number is continuing to rise, and it's expected by 2030 that there'll be 7 fall deaths worldwide every single hour. The NHS spends £2.3 billion per year on fall-related injuries, and many of those are preventable by a sensible fall prevention program. Falls are not an inevitable part of aging, and my own clinical experience can account for this, and there's countless research that shows structured fall prevention programs can be incredibly beneficial. Throughout the video, I'm going to go through simple tests you can do safely at home to ascertain your risk, and also stay to the end because I'll give you a home checklist that you can go through to look at the hazards around your own home. So stick to the end. It's a big topic, but let's get right into it. There's a huge list of things which can actually increase your risk of falling, and good news is we can actually deal and improve on each aspect of those. But they come under the classification of intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors. The most common of the intrinsic factors are your posture. Are you steep? Do you have a forward head posture? What's your walking like, or what we call gait instability? So do you walk nice and steady, or are you unstable on your feet? Your level of frailty and muscular weakness. It's important to have to strengthen your legs to be able to get up and down out of a chair, off a toilet, out of a car. And if you did fall on the ground, can you get up off the floor? So this level of frailty and muscular weakness is very important. Your balance and coordination. When we walk, most of it is actually on one leg. About 60 to 70% of walking is on one leg. So if you are unstable on one leg, then you're constantly at a risk of falling. Your eyesight. Can you spot hazards? Do you have the adequate eyesight or the light in your homes to create a safe environment free from falls and trip hazards? Chronic conditions such as arthritis, and obviously as an osteopath this is something we see all the time, and your level of arthritis, the quality of the movement in your joints. But also there's other conditions such as diabetes. Are you managing your diabetes? Medication side effects. Many medications unfortunately increase your chance of dizziness, low blood pressure, dehydration, and your risk of falling goes up with these side effects. Polypharmacy, which is 5 or more medications, radically increase your risk of falls. So are you aware of the potential side effects of the medication you're taking, and have you had those reviewed? Other lifestyle factors such as how much water you drink. I talk all the time about drinking lots of water. If you don't drink enough water, you can be very at risk of low blood pressure, and low blood pressure is associated with falling. Do you have a healthy diet so you manage your blood sugars, or are you prone to blood sugar crashes? All these intrinsic factors add up and accumulate, and the good news is you can systematically go through each one to make constructive improvements. Then we have extrinsic factors, which is more about the external environment, the environment you have around you. Now most falls are in their home, so you have to be aware of that. Make adjustments such as lighting, loose carpets, trip hazards and so on, but also be prepared for the environment outside of your home. Wet weather, puddles, icing conditions, footwear, all these things do play a part. Each of these things individually can increase your risk, but collectively massively increase your risk of falling. It's really important to have a comprehensive understanding of all these intrinsic and extrinsic factors and go through it in a nice systematic process to look at each one, assess your risk, and look at how you could make positive changes. For any fall prevention program, it's realistically sensible to have a thorough assessment of your body. With our clients, we assess them in a very thorough manner. We look at their posture, their coordination, we look at things such as arthritis, their joint proprioception, their balance, and we go through and identify where is the highest risk for you, because that's where we want to put the most amount of our effort into. The exercise portion of a fall prevention program often shows good results very quickly, but it's important to be continually monitored, continually assessed, so that your program can be changed, adapted, made more challenging in a safe way, but made more challenging. So not only do you get the 8 to 12 week improvement, you continue to improve to your maximum possible benefit. So let's start working through those intrinsic factors and how we could apply them in a fall prevention program. Let's start with posture and posture training. So why do we start here? Well, good posture is the most efficient way to stand and move, efficient from energy expenditure, your balance, and for the ability of joints to glide smoothly. A forward head posture is one of the most common imbalances we've seen and is often associated as part of an upper cross syndrome, which tends to involve forward head posture, a lowering of the first rib here, and developing an over curvature of the upper back, and this can lead to a kyphosis. When we sit in a nice upright position and stand and move in a nice upright position, your center of gravity is in the middle. This is where you want it to be. Every inch the head goes forwards, your center of gravity moves forwards. Now, if you think about it, standing nice and upright, you're here, but as you tip forwards, it becomes like a collapsing building. This is only going to get worse. You tip forwards, your center of gravity moves forwards. Now, bear in mind when you walk, walking is controlled falling. If your posture is already starting forward, your chance of falling forwards and hurting yourself and potentially fatally, or at least seriously, like hip fractures and other serious traumas, goes up and up and up. So with any fall prevention program, we need to assess your posture, find the dysfunction, and start to bring this head back via structured exercise coupled with some sort of hands-on therapy like osteopathy and so on. Very few people have a good posture nowadays. This starts with working from home, on computers, on phones. We used to live in indigenous populations where we used to carry things on their head, which encouraged people to push the head up. And when you push the head up, we actually call that axial extension. This encourages the head to come back into a nice alignment. Every inch your head sits forwards, you add a lot of leverage, and this encourages you further and further forwards and down. And when you look at a person who's very frail, you can identify that they look like they're going to fall because they're already tipped in the process of falling. So as an osteopath, we do encourage people to develop good postural habits. Regularly remind yourself to sit nice and upright, to take the head up and the shoulders back, to be in this position. Walk tall, sit tall, move tall, move with this upright and graceful manner. People like myself, osteos and physios and so on, they'll also be able to identify which key postural muscles need to be worked on. Because good habits is one thing. If you stand in a good posture, most people say they can't hold it very long. They actually start to feel pain and the muscles ache and they just collapse into this default mode, which is the process of falling. So you have a thorough assessment by someone locally in your area who knows how to work with postural dysfunctions. Even if you're incredibly hunched over, then they'll be able to give you exercises and possibly treatment as well to help bring you back in line. All fall prevention programs must start with trying to get you as upright as possible so you don't start the process from here, and over time it will get worse and you'll become more hunched and your risk of fall to go up. Now, there's lots of common mistakes which make people's posture worse. A lot of people, what they do is because they're in this rounded kyphotic forward head position, these muscles get incredibly tight. Now, the reason those muscles get tight is as you fall forwards, the muscles on the back, neck and shoulders are holding you. So no wonder they feel so tight. So yes, it sounds amazing to have someone massage and grind all those knots out. Those knots are the muscles trying so hard to keep you upright. So when you do a lot of deep tissue work in the back, around the neck and shoulders, these muscles like the upper trapezius, levator scap, it actually encourages you to go further forwards. What we find is if we address more of the actual anterior tissues like the pecs, and we give you stretching programs to pull the shoulders back, then we give you strengthening programs here. This actually will hold you in an upright position. Now, a quick test. If you pull your shoulders back like that, and as soon as you relax, they ping forwards, then you probably need to stretch the pec major and the pec minor, and you'll most likely need to strengthen certain muscles around the back and the neck and shoulders to pull you back. Therefore, no matter how much you have a forward head posture or kyphotic you are, there are improvements to be made, and those efforts are worth your time. Every good therapist, practitioner has an arsenal of techniques, a bag of magic tools that they use, and use the right tool for the right job, i.e. the right technique for the right patient. But one of the ones we use so often with fall prevention programs and postural training is the Eldora method. This is a super tool that we turn to with many of our patients. So what's the Eldora method? The Eldora method stands for longitudinal osteoarticular decooptational stretching. And what that basically means is strengthening your spine in this position, the axial extension, to decompress the spine. In a lot of physical therapy centers in the 80s and 90s would use traction to decompress the spine. However, it's a passive process. The machine does the work for you. So it's not that there's no value, but the best value, in my opinion, is using your muscles to decompress the spine. Now with the Eldora method, it gives you techniques to be very specific on the segments which need it most. So if we have someone with an L5, S1 low back disc herniation, we can give you exercises for the L5, S1. Likewise, if you have specific problems in your spine, the neck and thoracic spine, we can give you specific Eldoras for those individually, in addition to the broad spectrum stretches around there. Now, when you use the Eldora technique, not only do you open up those joints, which feels great and gets you standing taller, you're using your muscles to do the job, and therefore it creates permanent improvements. Let's swiftly move on to how you walk. Gait training, or walking, jogging, running, is a big part of fall prevention programs. The stride length, the stability between your steps. Can you stand on one leg? Does your leg roll in and out? Is your pelvis stable? The cadence, the rhythm, all these things affect how safely you walk, and a fall prevention program should look at assessing your gait and walking pattern, rhythm and movement. Walking is predominantly standing on one leg. So if you cannot balance on one leg or move smoothly through all the stages of your gait cycle, then walking in a safe manner becomes incredibly challenging. When people feel unstable when they walk, they're going to adjust in several ways. The most common of which is they shorten their stride length and they bend over. You've probably seen it. You've seen these people with this very short shuffling stride. Walking is predominantly a one-legged activity. 60 to 70% of your walking stride is on one leg. So you try to reduce that number, spend less time on one leg. But this isn't how the body is designed to work, and it interferes with the natural mechanics, and you're actually more likely to trip and catch your toes. If you're bending over because you feel unstable on your feet, we're in this vicious cycle. Because we can break down all the individual components of your gait cycle, your walking cycle, we can often spot the dysfunction. But sometimes you have to train all of it, but sometimes you have to train just one part, i.e. if you have poor balance, you don't want to stand on one leg. Walking's on one leg. So you try to spend less time on one leg and you pull the feet closer together and you get this shuffling stance. So sometimes it can be as simple as just balance training. Other times you'll see that the foot is over pronating, the foot is rolling in. And then again, this interferes with the natural gait cycle. There should be a beautiful rolling mechanism in the foot, not a folding in or over pronation. When we talk about gait stability, we have to look at some of the pelvic dysfunctions. These are the big drivers of your walking dysfunction. And the most common pelvic dysfunctions which could be causing you to be at risk of falling is a Trendelenburg or femoral torsion. If you look at the human leg, or by that factor, most animals' legs, most of the muscle is up around the hip and pelvis. So you've got the glutes, the hamstrings, all big at the top. And as you go down the leg, the muscles actually get smaller and smaller. So by the time it actually reaches your feet, they're not big muscles, they're small muscles, small tendons. Walking is on our feet. Why are the muscles so small in the feet? And that's because the power and most of the stability comes higher up. It's actually the hip and pelvis and core, and when you go further down the leg into the actual feet, the muscles in the feet are more for subtle movement and feedback, proprioception, subtle adjustment to uneven ground. So let's talk about the Trendelenburg dysfunction and the Trendelenburg gait, or waddling shuffling gait. When you stand on one leg, a leg comes up and it's the muscles on the weight-bearing leg around the hip which holds the pelvis level. If the muscles such as the glute medius, glute minimus on the weight-bearing leg are not strong enough, or they're not trained to work efficiently, even if the strength's there, then the pelvis will typically drop. And as the pelvis drops, this creates a very unstable walking pattern. We're meant to have a stable pelvis as you walk. But instead, the weight-bearing leg isn't able to support the off-weight-bearing leg and the pelvis drops. How we compensate is often we'll then side bend away. So you've got a mixture of the body bending one way, the hip dropping the other way, and this shifts from left to right. So you get this kind of waddling gait. If you read most orthopedic textbooks, they say a Trendelenburg dysfunction and a Trendelenburg gait is an indicator of an arthritic hip. But this is actually false. This dysfunction is often in teenagers or people in their early 20s. You see them walking and their pelvis does this. It might be subtle, but it does that. You see joggers and the pelvis drops and the leg flicks out. You'll see their ponytail wiggling. This is because the pelvis is not stable and it's going left, right, dropping up, down, on either side. If you add 40 to 50 years of that, you are going to wear your hip joint out. And that's often the first time someone like myself or a medical doctor or an orthopedic, often the first time someone's looked at your hip or looked at your pelvis is when they say to you, please stand on one leg, and they identify this drop. So a Trendelenburg is not the indicator of the arthritic hip. It's a significant factor which causes many arthritic hips. Whether you have an arthritic hip or not, we can strengthen these muscles up. If you're 18 and you have a dysfunction here, it can be corrected. If you are 80 plus, and the highest risk group for people who have falls is the 60, 65 plus, you can still stabilize this even if you have an arthritic hip as well. Now you'll see exercises online about how to strengthen the glute medius, and it's often a lateral raise of the hip, often laying on your side. It's normally done incorrectly. We see people lift the leg too high and it actually encourages the hip hike. When we train people, we teach people how to train that muscle by itself, and then when you train the gait pattern, you train all the muscles together in a functional movement pattern. Try it yourself at home. If it's safe and it's suitable for you, ask someone to video you from behind and literally stand on one leg, put the leg down. Stand on the other leg, put the leg down, and see, does your pelvis stay nice and stable, or in some way you compensating? Are you dropping the hip or even potentially hiking the hip? Both are a positive sign for a Trendelenburg. Therefore, let's start working on it, and this will make you more stable when you walk. The other big dysfunction is a femoral torsion. Your femurs naturally sit, or your thigh bones, they naturally sit at a slight angle like that. And in general, women's pelvis is a little bit wider, so therefore it's a steeper angle. And this is one of the reasons why women are more prone to falls than men statistically. But the muscles of the hip, not only do they hold pelvis stable, they stop the pelvis rolling in. So when the muscles are not strong enough around the hip and not trained, the thigh bones tend to roll in. You actually see your thigh is kind of pointing slightly across you, and the other thigh is pointing. The thigh should be pointing forwards, not across like this. Again, this is an unstable walking pattern. When the thigh rolls in, it puts a lot of pressure on the knee, and to compensate, the shin bone and the foot tend to roll out, and this flattens the foot. This will cause a bunion over time, because as you're rolling the foot over, it puts pressure on the foot and it deviates the big toe across, and this is why most people have a bunion. It's actually due to an overpronation of the foot, which often comes from a dysfunction higher up around the hip. And this is why when we do fall prevention programs, we look at the hip and pelvis, and we find if the foot is rolling over when you're walking, often it's higher up and it's the hip and pelvis causing that problem in the first place. So if you target the muscles around the hip in isolation, and then build functional movement patterns, which we discuss later, then you'll actually improve the ankle, foot, knee and thigh position very quickly. When we talk about femoral torsion and the Trendelenburg, one of the things to factor is if you wear high heels. So the pelvis sits at about 4 to 7 degree tip, roughly, give or take a few degrees here or there. And what they say is every inch of heel adds 11 degrees tip on the pelvis. So if you've got a forward head posture and you're a little bit kyphotic and you've got a slightly unstable, a mild to moderate Trendelenburg, and your legs roll in, you do not want to add a 1 inch heel or higher and tip that pelvis 11 degrees forward, pushing you forwards. So much as high heels might look nice and build your confidence, it does increase your risk of falling. I recommend flat shoes wherever possible. So we've discussed the hip and pelvic stability, but we also do look at the foot and ankle. Sometimes people have flat feet and the ankle is all twisted and it's not coming higher up. Not very often. If it is just that, maybe an orthotic or some sort of arch support will be a good idea. But once we do start to raise that, we have to look at the mechanics of the toe, we have to look at the ankle, we have to look at the flexibility in the hamstrings so you can get a nice clearance. If someone has a restriction in this movement of the ankle, what we call dorsiflexion, But how can you walk a nice stride? Because you need to be able to bend the foot up to get a nice stride length. And if you don't have enough range of motion here, then you can't clear your foot, and therefore you're very prone to catching your toes as you walk. Restriction in ankle movement can be simple as ankle stretches. You correct that foot position, you can walk way more comfortably, extending the stride length. Even your toe range of motion, if you can bend your foot nice like that, but you can't bend the toes back, because you've got arthritis there, bunions, even simple stretches of the toes will allow you to walk better and walk smoother. So at home, have some on video you walk. Look, do you have a nice smooth movement, or is the pelvis dropping? Is the pelvis rolling in? Do you have a nice gliding kind of movement through the foot and the ankle? Or is it all rolling very unstable or short and shuffly?